Good evening, and on behalf of the Queer Newark Oral History Project, the Department of African American and African Studies at Rutgers University, Newark, and the Newark LGBTQ Community Center, warmest welcome. In these times especially, we need to find opportunities to support the works of artists and to celebrate when and however we can. So when Marina Carreira shared that she was curating the Divine Feminist anthology and described it as a collection of art and poetry by a multitude of genius, glorious women and non-binary folks who have found the divine in all places, their bodies, their cities, in heartbreak and politics, in sex and motherhood, and for who art and literature are both a form of spiritual practice and an act of protest. We knew this was cause for celebration. Before I turn the virtual mic over to Marina, who will share more about the anthology and the importance of the work and introduce each artist, a few brief notes. This event is being recorded for our archive and will be made available on our YouTube channels. I will post the link in the chat and hope you will subscribe and follow our social media accounts to learn more about our events of interest and news in general. Closed captioning is enabled. To view, click on the closed caption or CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to display subtitles or to view a full transcript. To ensure the comfort of everyone participating today, chat messages are only visible to the speakers, but we look forward to your questions and rousing discussion. So please enter any questions or comments as they can up, and they will answer as many live as time allows. And with that, Marina, thank you so much for inviting us to partner and share in this great work. We can't wait to read it.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you to Queer Newark Oral History Project. Thank you to the Newark LGBT Community Center, and thank you to the African American and African Studies Department at Rutgers University. And thank you all for joining us today. More than ever, I think of this anthology, Divine Feminist, as a testament to the resilience of queer women and non-binary folks. It's been a very long year, and in the midst of a pandemic, I was looking for not so much of a refuge, but a point of connection between me and all the women and non-binary folks that I admire. So I rallied the troops, and together we collaborated and created this amazing collection of art and poetry that talks about really, our experiences as women, as non-binary folks, as queer beings, as mothers, as artists, as citizens of this very complicated country. And tonight I'm so happy to be introducing you to some of the folks in this anthology. And specifically for tonight, I picked folks that were Newark based and folks that were queer or non-hetero, as I like to sort of say it, and allies as well. So I'm really excited to have Cindy, both Danielles here, Darla, EJ, Grisel, Kat, Lillian, Lynn, and Paula, two of who will join us via video because one of them had an emergency. But thank you again for making this event possible, and thank you for sharing space with us today. I'm going to kick things off with our first poet, Cindy Goncalves. I'm going to read Cindy's bio, and then Cindy's going to read from the anthology, which I guess I should explain a little bit about it, right? The anthology came as a way, like I said, to connect for women artists, women and non-binary artists in this local area, but even internationally, to connect and talk about their lived experiences and about feminism as art making, right, as a practice of art. And that's how this anthology was born. All the proceeds of the anthology are going to the Pink Door Retreat, which is a safe writing retreat space for non-men writers of color. So every copy, the proceeds go to supporting this space, which is really important to us, and to get fresh books for us to support LGBTQ, POC, WOC spaces. Cindy Gonçalves is a Luso-American queer feminist school counselor with a love for puns, sarcasm, and codfish cakes. She was a featured reader at the Dodge Poetry Festival in 2016, and her work has appeared in the Journal of New Jersey Poetry and No Tender Fences, an anthology of immigrant and first-generation American poetry. Cindy.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for taking the time. I know, as oddly enough, I feel like in this year we've learned that you can have both as much time and no time at all to do anything. So thank you for taking the time, for being here, and for bringing us all together. So the poem I'm going to read has sprinklings of Portuguese in it. The biggest one that you're going to have to know is just that the word avó means grandmother in Portuguese. This is called Conversas com a Avó, a Queer's Prayer. Sabes, filha, antigamente we only had two pairs of shoes, one for work and one for church. And even though our work shoes had more holes than soul, our church shoes could walk our souls straight to the Holy Ghost. We weren't educated, mas a nossa fé was the only certainty we needed. And it was that simple, as long as rosary beads wrapped around her fingertips every night. Só Deus é que sabe, filha. Only God knows. But avó, does your God know the things that keep people like me up at night? Does he know why clocks can have hands but not middle fingers? Does he know that of the 12 children you baptized, not one stayed with you long enough to hear your brittle bones sing operas? Does he know that sometimes you wish you meant as much to him as he means to you? Does he know that I hear him every time my lover speaks, that he sounds like a woman and his voice kind of turns me on? Actually, does your God have a confirmed gender pronoun, or have we really accepted that he created the clit? Also, does your God really hate fags? And does he hashtag Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter? Has he told you why he seems to be completely over the one nation under him, completely divisible, with liberty and justice for all rich, white, cishet, able-bodied, documented Christian men? Do my stretch marks make your God jealous? Does he make lightning so powerful because of them? Does he know that I cringe at the thought of prayer and that I only served as an altar kid so I could sit next to the prettiest girl in CCD? Doesn't he feel bad when people thank him for things they did themselves? I live in this target practice of a body while he is off letting kids die in cages. And don't tell me it's part of his plan, because even the devil is not that cruel. Your God thinks I can't be my own God, and my God knows he's wrong. Thank you. Get your copy. Links are in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Cindy. Do you want to talk a little bit about what inspired the poem and about how you sort of, because I know you practice, obviously, writing is part of your feminist advocacy, but maybe other ways where you practice feminism, and if art is sort of in that conversation.
Yeah, so this poem was written sort of, so I grew up very Portuguese Catholic, you know, you do the sacraments, you wear the dresses, you wear the white, and all the weird, you know, heteronormative, strange traditions of wearing white and being paired up with boys in suits. It's very strange. And I was an altar kid. And, you know, it was one of those things where I was an altar kid because time sort of went by faster when you have to go to church every Sunday. Like, you ring bells, you know, it's fun, I guess. That's about as fun as it's going to get on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. So once I was sort of at a point in my life where I was able to separate, you know, from my parents forcing me to sort of go to church, and I was able to take a step back, this poem kind of solidified that all of that was very performative. And this concept of a God, or at least an institutionalized religion, for me was very foreign, and it didn't fit with what worked for my life. I always say, like, if you can sort of marriage the queerness and the religion, like, props, right? I've sort of existed outside of those, and I found my home in my queerness and less in sort of a God or a spirituality, and that's just sort of my experience. So this poem is really kind of honoring that, and honoring myself as my own God in that way. As far as my work being feminist, I think my work is very sort of direct. It's very sort of outspoken to my reality and the reality of the people around me, especially for my family. I honor my family a lot, and the stories that they were never really able to tell growing up. So I try to make that sort of my mission, at least right now, in my work. And I think that's sort of how my feminism shows up, in speaking for the people in my life who have not been able to, or haven't had the mic at all at some point.
Did you grow up, was feminism sort of a concept you grew up around, in the same way I guess religion was, or did you find feminism sort of in your own ways?
Yeah, no, the idea of feminism was, you know, I mean, I have a very powerful mother, which I realize now, but you know, my mom is a badass woman who was told for a very long time that she had to be quiet. And she, you know, now she's sort of, you know, we're very Chihuahuas, me and my mother, in the same way. We kind of just bark. And I think that's our way of being, and that's our way of acting. But the idea of feminism was really just like, you know, you grow up in a household, and I have an older brother, so you hear the traditional, like, oh, you know, you set the table, your brother's playing soccer, leave him alone, right? Like you know those cliches. And now I feel like, you know, my parents have been exposed to my work, or my mother has, and it's always interesting kind of seeing her take on it, because like she's very like proud on Facebook, which is nice. And she'll like, you know, she came to like shows, which was really cool and really weird, because I'm like, there's certain subject that I'm like, I don't want to say this in front of my mother, but I also don't want to censor myself. And I feel like there is a sense of pride there, which is really nice. And I feel like I get the sense that for her, there's also this voice that, you know, there's this glimmer of like, okay, so at least something was done right here. I guess the barking all of her life was worth this moment of her barking on a stage and making points on the stage.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Cindy. If you can just share your social media for our viewers, where they can find some of your work, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Our next reader is Danielle Bero, who was born in Queens to hippie parents, given a dose of Shel Silverstein, Tupac, jazz, classic rock, and was the recipient of a Posse Scholarship, nominated for the Daily News Unsung Hero in Education. She's won slam competitions at New Eurekans Poets Cafe, Bowery Poetry Club, and Ubud Writers Festival, is a Jack Straw Cultural Center Fellow, and is published in New American Writing, Sinister Wisdom, Lavender Review, and Mad Woman in the Attic. Danielle, will you read your piece for us, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I want to thank Marina for putting this all together. And also, I have to thank Arts by the People for connecting me to the brilliance that is Marina and Lynn and Kathy, and welcome me into the space. And get fresh, man. I wish I had this anthology when I was a kid. It would have been so profound for me to hold in my hands at 14, 15 years old, just experiencing a world where I didn't see myself existing. So this poem is called Eggs Quarantine. Souffled sounds the sexiest on the drop down, in the paper dress, scopes and jelly inside me, my rough knuckles. Hoodies are the only thing keeping me alive on days like these. I need to hear my parents say that they were happy when I was born, over and over. Long hair strands whipping stick to my chapstick, tights, polished purses hold my throat, closing, bruised, almost to the brink of blacking out. I black it all out. Sag my crotch, slow my pace, slouch my spine, stroke and stroke moving me forward. She holds me up to the light. He drowns me in the East River. I have cried so many days straight without reason, count my calendar as the excuse or the moon, search for children's scraped knees and the corner dude's hunger, dying bees. I pick up the stingers to feel something other. Waves shimmer with plastic and cardboard, checkbox other. I want to surf, but I'm afraid of losing earth. I don't know much else. I inject 3 needles into my abdomen for 10 days to prove that I am a woman worthy of legacy. Thank you.
I love that poem. Can you speak a little bit about sort of how the poem was born and what your sort of practice in feminism is through art?
Absolutely. Yeah. So about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before we went into quarantine, I went through the in vitro process to freeze my eggs to get ready for the fertility process. And it was incredibly terrifying in a lot of different ways. And just never really hearing about the process, never really thinking that as a queer person that I could even have a family or that I've seen families exist. So it was a really intense process, and I felt like I didn't really know how to process it. And so I felt like poetry was the only way that I could really lean into that space. And so in thinking about my own feminism, it's tough because like finding the balance between my masculinity and femininity, I feel like is a struggle every single day, honestly. But similar to what Cindy was talking about, I was incredibly lucky that I had a mom that understood that. And she was very much so a feminist in her own right growing up. And she really imparted all of that wisdom on me. She didn't make excuses. She was loud. She took up space. She shaved her head. All the things that women weren't allowed to do or were told not to do. She did those things, and I watched it. She didn't wear makeup, you know what I mean? And she lived her life the way that she wanted to live her life. And while she's not queer, for me as a queer person, it made me realize that like there are ways to live as a woman, many different ways, and all of them are okay, even if it's not validated and even if you don't see it in the media.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Is poetry your way into practicing feminism, or are there other sort of outlets or other expressions that you employ to sort of talk about, equality and or finding that balance? Because I think, one of the causes I talk about in terms of in understanding feminism is this very idea of what does a woman look like? How do they get to present themselves to the world and be accepted? And the idea that men don't own masculinity, right? Is poetry your vehicle primarily for that? Or are there other ways?
I would say that poetry is my vehicle in being able to articulate it, but I think that my presence is really my vehicle, right? Just me being in the spaces, being a very small in stature, but big in presence, having that blended masculine, being able to kind of just take up space in both ways and allowing myself to be feminine and masculine at the same exact time. I think a lot of times when I meet people, they're very confused, right? They're like, wait, what? Are you a boy or a girl? And I'm like, I always say yes. Even when I work with young people, right? Excuse me, miss, are you a boy or a girl? First of all, you called me miss, but my answer is always yes, because I feel like I take up both spaces at the same time. And so I think my vehicle is my body. And so for so long, I covered my body because I was ashamed of it. I didn't feel comfortable in it. I felt like I was too small and too weak compared to what I felt inside. And so I felt like my body didn't match my personality. So I covered myself a lot, extra baggy clothes. Luckily at the time in the 90s, it was fashionable.
Yeah.
But, recently I've come into my own and like, I find myself kind of deviating from what I thought was, the dichotomy of male versus female, right? I felt like I had to be this man to be able to be the person that I was. And I realized that I didn't have to do that anymore. And so poetry is the way to articulate it, but I think my body is the way to just bring it to the public.
Oh, snap. Yes. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for your work. Thank you for contribution to the anthology. And drop your social media stuff in the chat, or any work that you want to share or sites, please share with us. And thank you again, Danielle. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Our next Danielle is an artist. I was lucky enough to have two of my favorite artists in this anthology. I mean, a lot of the artists in this anthology I respect and look up to, but these two women, especially Danielle and Lillian, are important to me because they've inspired my own journey as a visual artist, and they constantly sort of teach me new ways to look at the world through their own art. So I'm very excited to have included them in the anthology and excited to have them here today. So Danielle Scott is a soft-spoken artist who uses her work as a conduit to explore bold, fearless, thought-provoking work, which draws its inspiration largely from her journey and life experience. She's a mixed media assemblage artist, and her work expresses politically and socially charged messaging. She has a bajillion residencies happening right now, and I think she's actually installing an exhibit today. Right? Am I right, Danielle? Were you in the middle of that? Of course you are. Danielle is in the middle all the time of work. She's she's probably the hardest working artist that I know personally. So thank you so much for having contributed to the anthology and for constantly inspiring the work. So while you talk a little bit about your piece in the anthology, I'm going to see if I can bring it up. So Danielle, if you want to talk about what inspired it.
Okay. So one, thank you guys for having me. Marina, thanks for putting my piece in the anthology. The piece that you're about to see is actually a Black doll. And what inspired it during that time was, well, it's not that he inspired it, but it was words that were spoke by Trump. Trump had this thing with the Muslim ban. The travel ban was going on during that time. There was also the March on Washington. So in the image itself, there's these little pink pins. So that, sorry guys. So that kind of represents the pink pussy hats. Oops. Okay. So you guys can still hear me, right?
Yes.
So in the piece itself, there's a bunch of pins, pink pins. So that represents the hats, the pink pussy hats that were done on the during the march. So the piece itself, when he started talking about the Muslim law, he was also targeting Muslim women for wearing their hijabs. And during that time, there was this big thing where now we have National Hijab Day because of what he was speaking. So what I decided to do while Hillary Clinton was running for president during that time was to dress up this Black doll in a suit, with the suit being the American flag. One, because like I said, with the American flag itself, and I think I caught Cindy saying it too, I don't feel like we're under one God, one justice for all, and liberty. I mean, I don't feel any of that is true. So what I've done is I gave this Black doll, or this little girl, some power by putting that flag on her, since that's what we kind of see as our huge symbol, but showing that women are powerful, that we can run the country, and it can be any woman. It could be a woman of color, any, Spanish, Black, whatever. As someone who's an Afro-Cuban woman, I guess that kind of dictates the image, but she also has a hijab on her. And I actually used one of my Muslim students to do this project. She created the suit. She also put the hijab on. The little girl in the doll is actually laying on a bed of Hebrew. So my background is Afro-Cuban Polish Jew. So I needed to put that piece of me into it. So that's what the piece is really about. It's just standing up for feminist rights, us having the same rights as men when it comes to politics, when it comes to government, and just using my voice in a different way to kind of address those things. Like, because I'm a visual artist and not a poet or not a writer, I try my best to tell my story through my work, with everything that I do. And most people know that I live by that saying from Nina Simone, which is, the artist's duty is to tell the times. So I find myself always telling the times when it comes to my work. And during the time that this was actually, created, was when Hillary was going again, trying to run as president. And when we were going through the travel ban and everything with the Muslims and the Muslim people, and then him saying, yes, we're under one God, but we're not if you're separating these two, religions from each other. So that's kind of what the piece is about. It can get a little bit deeper, but I don't want to take up too much time or space with that, but it's basically about our rights. And I try to put that in my work, our rights as a woman, as women, our rights as, LGBT, a part of the community, and as women of color as well.
Thank you, Danielle. One of the things that struck me so much about this piece, and as soon as as you send it to me, and I've seen it in person, which is, it's a whole different it's a whole different vibe, right? But this piece, I automatically remembered Malcolm X's quote that the most disrespected woman in America is the Black woman, right?
Yep.
But historically, as we know, the backbone of this country is not only Black folks, but specifically Black women, right? And I think that this piece completely harnesses that energy and really speaks to that, like most of your work. And I think that the beauty in your work is that it is layered, right? You talk about women's rights, you talk about queer rights, you talk about, you know, Afro rights, Latinx rights, Afro Latinx rights, right? There's so many layers to the conversations in your work that I knew that this piece had to be included, because this is, you know, this is the future, right, of our country. The future of our country, you know, should be a Muslim woman of color president, right? Should be a queer woman president, should be a queer person, non-binary person president. And I think as sort of devastating as your work can seem, it also offers hope, right? As I think almost all your work does. Do you want to talk a little bit about your project that you're currently doing, and then let us know where we can see it?
Oh, yeah. So, you know what I wanted to say? The book actually came out the day that, you know, we had our female vice president.
Right.
So
oh, that's, yes.
And to see that and then see the piece, I was like, oh, like it was like full circle.
Yeah.
To have both things, you know, happen the same exact day. I am currently working on a very large body of work. I'm in residency at 150 Bay Street. So that's in Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm installing a solo show right now. It's actually at 150 Bay. It's going to showcase 10 of the pieces in the series. The series is pretty large. So the series that I'm putting up right now is called They Don't Know Who We Be. And it's based on my soon-to-be 20-year-old son. And it started with him, and my son said to me, Mommy, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And I've been feeling really uncomfortable more and more lately with everything that's going on with Black and brown people that are innocent being killed. He said, I feel like a walking target. So my son goes to school in Syracuse. My son is 6'1". My son speaks 3 different languages. He plays like 4 different instruments, and he's going to school for aerospace engineering. So there's this child of color walking around Syracuse just fearing for his life because of who he is, just because of his skin tone, not because of who he is. So the series was based and built around Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. Martin Luther King said, I dream and I hope one day that my 4 children of color will be known for the content of their character and not just for their skin tone. So the series, you'll see, I have photographed my son, my oldest who's 19, my youngest who's 4, my nephew, and it's a series of 30 at this point. It's the males of my mom's side and my dad's side. And I'm photographing them holding a plaque. And the plaque is showing their characteristics or the content of their character. So my oldest is holding a sign that says my human, or human. The other one says my son. The other one says athlete, student, scholar, just really identifying who they are. And then it gets into the depth of like, my cousin is also, he's a father. So it's just really showing who they are outside of their skin tone. It's a very large series. There's a lot of gold in the work, a lot of cathedral things that are going on. I was raised Catholic and Jewish. So what I'm doing with the work is actually adorning the men as if they are gods and they are kings and they are superior, and not to be just seen as this target walking around because of the skin tone. Noah is 4 years old and he's being adorned as an angel. So he has a lot of feathers going on, a lot of gold leafing. I will definitely let you know when the solo exhibition of that will be up. We're just installing today. Definitely the next 2 weeks, everyone will be able to come in and see it. It's a small, intimate space where everybody can come in and take the work in. Once the series is done, it's going to the Glass Gallery at Mana Contemporary. So that'll be in October because the last piece is fairly large. I'll give you the information. And then there's my artist Instagram page. I normally post on there. So it's just simple artist Danielle Scott. If you want information, and you can get it from Marina as well. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for your contribution to the book and to the world. Your art is important, and I'm so excited for this show, especially since I got a little sneak peek of it. I feel like I'm like sort of like in VIP already. But if you can put your social media stuff in the chat for everybody so that you keep it. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate you. Our next poet is Darla Himeles, whose book is out with Get Fresh, who it published this anthology. She is the author of Flesh Enough and Cleave, which was just born this month, both available from Get Fresh Books. She lives in Philadelphia with her wife, daughter, and 2 orange cats. Darla, would you please read your piece for us?
Love to. My dear one, my dear love, even you, human animal, concede. It is spring. It is spring, April daffodils and cherry blossoms and wide bright sky soften the edges of everything. All roads this year under the surge of blue mottled clouds lead to contagious hospitals where wet gowns hang for reuse and lungs stiffen atop crowded cots. Upright humans scurrying and praying, suds in basins and salt streams mined through the heart. Street runner, dog walker, dodger, even you concede.
We have a Zoom bomber, yes.
Total Zoom bomber. Mama's reading the poem. Okay.
She's clearly a poet too.
Oh my God. She came home today. I'm sorry for this unplanned bomb, but she's like, Mama, I wrote you a book. And she gave it to me. And
she sure did.
Yeah, she sure did. Okay.
Let's do it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Of course.
My dear one, my dear love, even you, human animal, concede. It is spring. It is spring, April daffodils and cherry blossoms and wide bright sky soften the edges of everything. All roads this year under the surge of blue mottled clouds lead to contagious hospitals where wet gowns hang for reuse and lungs stiffen atop crowded cots, upright humans scurrying and praying, suds in basins and salt streams mined through the heart. Street runner, dog walker, dodger, even you concede darkness divides dreamer from dream when dystopian maps broadcast thousands of kin breathless and dying. It is spring, and night sweats twist you up in peach cotton sheets. My dear one, what if frenzy fails you? What if now and now love settles a warm, steady hand on your lucky rise and falling? My dear love, the wind strengthens you, and I am right here, woods runner, street runner, my dear human sparsely furred and tender, by these roads to contagious hospitals, by these roads to duff beds where new-eyed fawns quietly rest.
Thank you, Darla. There's just something about queer love poetry that is better than straight love poetry. But do you want to talk a little bit about that poem and sort of its origins and your own practice with poetry or art as a feminist practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote this poem a year ago this month when I was struggling a lot with anxiety. I have an anxiety diagnosis, and part of my work in life is about destigmatizing mental health and talking about mental health and mental illness. And I was doing a lot of guided meditations led by Sarah Blondin, if any of you have ever listened to her. And she addresses the self as my dear one as part of the guided meditation, which I find so tender and so helpful for modeling self-love. It's such an important part of my practice as a woman, as a feminist, as a lesbian, as all the things, is learning to trust my own body and trust my body's truth. And part of this poem was about like putting my own hand on my own chest, you know, and like reminding myself and anyone else who reads it that like we can comfort ourselves, we can give ourselves peace, we can give ourselves compassion and understanding and healing, which is a really important part of my own spiritual, I guess, awareness or life.
Yeah, we certainly don't love on ourselves enough, right? Especially folks that I think are, you know, not that thing, folks that are queer. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the queer body and sort of the traumas that the queer body experiences differently than, you know, a heteronormative experience or a cis experience even. So even though that poem reads like a love poem, which it can, right?
Yeah.
But I love knowing that it's a self-love poem, right? That there can be this eroticism of self too, right? That I think we're never taught as women, especially to sort of find and you know, tangle with. Do you want to talk a little bit about your writing as feminist practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, how do I even define that? Because all of my life is my feminist practice, right? Like it's the person that I've become is a person who fully embraces that a woman can be any number of things, kind of building off of what Danielle was saying earlier, you know, learning how to express my authenticity as someone who sort of swings between different gender presentations and identities. You know, I relate to that, being feminine and masculine at the same time, and different flavors of each at different times. And that all goes into my writing. It all goes into the way that I think about other bodies and about basically every issue that matters to me.
Right.
So yeah, it's not the most articulate answer, I know, but
no, it's I think it very much speaks to Danielle Bero, what she was saying too, right? Our bodies are our vehicles of expression as well. So I think, you know, just our existence, and I know that's been cliche too, but our existence as queer people in our bodies is very much resistance in itself. Just the fact that we walk and move and breathe, right? So I think it's the most truthful answer for sure. Do you want to talk a little bit about Cleave and plug Cleave, and then
yeah. And I just want to say that, like, I feel like as a queer person, learning to love the self and learning the body, love the body is also part of like what matters to me in my work, speaking to other people. That it is a love poem out and in at the same time. So yeah, Cleave is a book that the oldest poem is 17 years old in this book, and the newest is less than a year, which is it's quite a stretch of time.
And that cover is stunning.
Thank you. The artist's name is Dawn Surratt, and I love her work. The book explores childhood trauma and my own journey to conceive a child, which was long and twists and turns. And it also has a lot of love poems to my wife, Betsy. So,
it's beautiful. Drop your social media stuff and where people can get Cleave as well in the chat. And thank you so much, Darla, for your contribution. And I'm so excited for Cleave. I know I've told you that 500 times, but I mean it. So our next reader is Dr. Grisel Acosta, who is one of my favorite people in the world. She is an associate professor at the City University of New York, BCC, where she teaches creative writing and Latinx literature. She is the editor of Latina Outsiders, Remaking Latina Identity, and her first book of poetry, Things to Pack on the Way to Everywhere, is a finalist for the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize and is out now, just like Darla's collection from Get Fresh Books. So welcome, Grisel.
Thank you so much, Marina. And oh, all right. So for some reason, my camera just changed up on me, and that's cool because Basquiat can be seen now. All right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy. So thank you so much, Marina. Thank you to Get Fresh. Thank you to all the attendees and all the fellow panelists. This is an amazing reading so far. So I'm really excited about reading my poem, and this is called To Reach for the Divine, and I will talk about it a little bit right after.
Thank you.
To reach for the divine. Does it look like the singer? Girdled belly in sequins, platinum wig coiffed into a whip of vanilla sundae, villainous arches on forehead, black stilettos shouldering a dancing booty, a woman screaming, and I'm just not satisfied. Or is it the neon, dollar store, loop image of crepuscular rays haloing a shrouded virgin with her bloody heart on her chest, pulsing with LED and ticking with the time, a lighted clock, merging the holy and divine? Or does it appear as snow, falling into your curls as you slush your way to a loft, knee-deep in flurries, unstoppable, ready to write your first article on music, wailing into the Chicago night, unafraid to fail, excited just to try? Or does it not appear at all? A silence more profound than slumber, not an empty stadium, the emptiness of an absent stadium, a nothingness, not an empty sky, the emptiness of no sky. Like my father's eyes, the moment I knew he was gone. So, I will talk about this and how I related it to the theme of the book.
First of all, I thought you wrote it for the book, okay? Because I was just like, oh, look, she wrote this poem for the anthology. And no, right?
No, I did.
Oh, did you? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I learned about the theme, I was like, okay, and the title's going to be Divine Feminist, and I'm like, immediately, when I think of divine, I think of Divine, who I grew up with, who was a hero of mine. Right. And truthfully, I've been told for 20 years by my partner that I am a gay man. And it just felt right to start this poem with Divine the singer and performer, which also touches on just my queer experience growing up and what I was into. And then keeping with that, I also thought of the way in which camp is very much part of religion. And, you know, I thought of the neon kind of LED lighted Jesus or Virgin Mary that you'll find on these, you know, these really kind of tacky displays, but which I absolutely love.
Me too.
So that kind of, you know, I connected it to that as well. But then I'm also thinking of the feminist aspect of it. And when I actually felt like I came into my own power, and that was when I finally chose to be a writer when I was an undergraduate in Chicago. And I was working at the college newspaper, and I pitched my first story to my editor. And I was dating a very abusive person at the time. And I knew I had to lie to this person to cover this story. And I did. And I did not care. And I felt very powerful doing this. And it was one of the many decisions I had to make throughout my life, scary decisions, to be a feminist, to believe in myself over anything else. So that's really that moment. I've never forgotten that moment of, it was literally a snowstorm in Chicago, and I was like trudging through knee-deep snow to get to this loft party that had several really excellent musicians that I was going to cover. And yeah, I've never forgotten that. And then finally, the last stanza is about really truly being on one's own, watching, you know, I was caring for my dad and then he passed away, and knowing, yes, I am completely reliant on myself right now. No one's taking me, you know, under their wing anymore. And isn't that the most feminist thing of all, to say we don't need that wing? I mean, maybe we do when we're young, when we're fledgling, but yeah. Anyway, that's the journey I'm taking in that poem.
That's amazing. Yeah, reading the poem, I felt like I was in, what was that club in New York City that was in a church? Limelight.
Limelight.
Like there was this moment of sort of epiphany, right, where the speaker at the end does have this moment of like self-actualization, right? This sort of moment that's like, there's no need to sort of look for the divine, because I am the divine. Like I am this light, right? I am this this power, right? So I appreciate that you wrote that for the anthology. It's certainly you know, electrified the whole and the anthology. And just before you go, can you speak a little bit about things to pack on the way to everywhere, and then drop all your social media stuff and where folks can get it? Look at that cover. Talk about neon.
This is my book. Yeah. So this book again is really about journey. And it's organized in a way where it's really kind of a journey organizational method too. So it starts, you know, the first steps is the first section of the book, and then at the gates, which implies heaven, and then the end that is no end. So basically, what I look at in things to pack on the way to everywhere is kind of this idea that, you know, there's this idea that you pack at the beginning of your trip, but the fact is that in this journey, you're packing along the way, and you're taking things along with you that you really need for your survival. So some of the things that I broach in the book are my Afro-Latinidad, definitely misogyny and dealing with patriarchal norms. And yeah, I would say those are the major themes. But again, because I've been taking care of my elderly parents for the past 10 years or so, a little bit more, definitely loss. And you know, I finished it during the pandemic, so those themes are there too. And of course, love, always love.
Always love. Well, thank you.
And I will post all the, thank you. I will post all the stuff, all the Instagram and everything in the chat.
And a link to the book too, please. All the authors on here today, please post links to your books in the chat, as well as your social media handles. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, everyone here is my fave. I love you all so much. You're all super divine in my book, right? Kathleen Kremins is our next reader. She's a Newark native of Irish Catholic immigrant parents, a retired educator, and a lifelong Jersey poet whose poem, The Curve of Things, is part of Arts by the People's Moving Words 2020 project. She also serves as a board member of Arts by the People, which is a nonprofit org whose mission is to establish, operate, promote, and conduct educational programs, opportunities, classes, and sessions in the creative arts for the public, especially seniors and youth. And then I'll let Kat go ahead and share the good news as well. So Kat, if you want to read your poem.
Yeah, I'll start with the poem because the poem's shorter than my explanation of the poem. So, diversity of matter. Before there was a periodic table, there was chaos. Some call me unruly, but life is an experiment, the search for patterns, deriving relationships, and predicting behaviors. It's a chemical thing. Chlorine, bromine, iodine, calcium, strontium, barium, sulfur, selenium, tellurium. Breaking the law is the law. Law of triads, telluric screw, law of octaves. I'll show you where to touch me.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the creation of that poem?
So after Marina renamed me and I went from Kathy to Kat sometime around this time last year, actually in July of last year, I think it was a 15-15 that Arts by the People had, and this actually came out of a prompt that I think Tamara Zabrizier put out there, and it was to write a poem using scientific language. And this is a perfect example of my nonlinear, non-binary thinking in terms of putting a poem together, and that ultimately all of my poems are about love in one way or another. And so I started to think about diversity of matter. I started to think about the physical and the chemical components. And then I started to think about an exhibit that I had seen in 2011 at MoMA, Francis Ali's, I think it was called The State of Deception. But what had drawn me were his videos. He had chased tornadoes and took video of them for about 10 years. And there was a quote at the bottom, and it said, "Scientifically speaking, tornadoes," I did write it down because I knew I would forget it. "Tornadoes are instances of order emerging from chaos." So I started to think about all of this and how that connected to love, especially queer love. And so from that very, what appeared to be rather chaotic thinking, came this very highly constructed poem with a lot of chemistry terms. And I really sucked at chemistry, but it was good. I went back and did some work. So,
I feel like that's why we learned chemistry, so that as poets we can use them in our poems, right, later on, and say it was worth, learning that. Do you want to talk a little bit? I was going to ask you about what your practice is. How is poetry your sort of your vehicle for advocacy? But in your conversation about love as radical, right? As the way you sort of enter everything. Do you want to talk a little bit about love as feminist practice? Do you think it is, or?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I just have, I feel very lucky in the fact, I mean, I can pretty much guarantee that I'm the oldest person on this panel. I was very, very lucky in the fact that, I grew up in this house with lots of people, as, immigrant families did and do. And that I had a father who was a feminist. There was never a moment where he told me that, I could be whomever I wanted to be. He's the person who gave me the birds and the bees talk, because if my mother gave me the talk, I would have been a nun. So it's a good thing that Dad gave me that talk. He explained sex, he explained love, he explained how they connect, and sometimes they disconnect. But he was very firm about, you love who you love, it doesn't matter. And then I also was very lucky in the fact that I went to an all-girls high school with this amazing group of 42 girls who were still all friends, and they are, they were mostly, kids from Newark like I was, and Orange and East Orange and Maplewood and South Orange. And, we lifted each other and we loved each other. And then I wound up going to what is now the, which I still have a hard time saying, St. Elizabeth University. But again, I spent another 4 years with Sisters of Charity, but also all women. And so there was never, I'm like a bull in a china shop, because I think that if you love enough, that it kind of it rings out from you, and hopefully other people pick it up and run with it. And my dad was very much involved in social justice movements, and so I was pulled along, and it was about love. It was about love.
Love, certainly.
Love in action, not just saying.
Right. Love in action. I was gonna say.
The words are easy. Love in action is definitely harder.
Certainly harder. Kat, do you want to share the news about your book coming out?
No, you mean now that the contract's signed. So
yes.
So the good news, speaking of Newark, is that my chapbook called Undressing the World, which is kind of it's a love letter pretty much to my father and to the city of Newark. It will be published by Finishing Line Press. It'll probably be out in the fall. So, and thanks to so many of you here on the screen for, if it wasn't for Lynn, I'm not sure I would be back in the poetry game. I mean, poetry has always been a part of my life, and it's always been a part of my everyday life. But Darla, it was interesting when, you're saying about, that journey with your poems. Some of these poems were written 25 years ago when I was getting my MFA at Goddard College, and they were written about the 60s. So it's an interesting span of poetry in the chapbook. And Marina did some deep diving and reading, and just wanted to thank you all. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for your contribution. I love this poem. Thank you, Kat, for your work, and drop all of your information in the chat for everyone, please. Next is Lillian Ribeiro, who I think of as, and I don't know if I've ever said this to her, but I think of her as like my art mom, the way that like drag queens have like drag mothers. She's like my art mama. And she's the woman who inspired me to sort of really tap into visual art as another way to sort of document and testify my own lived experience. So I was so excited when she let me use her piece for this anthology. Lillian Ribeiro is a deliberate multidisciplinary creator, change maker, educator, and drama therapist. Her artwork explores intersectional identities connected to her Luso-American urban immigrant roots of Newark, New Jersey. I'm going to bring up Lillian's piece, and then I'm going to have her talk a little bit about it.
Well, first I want to say thank you. I am so honored.
Yeah.
What wonderful words. I first met Marina when she was running Brick City Speaks out of my small gallery space housed in the Project for Empty Space called Lips, Newark. And that's when we first started working together and getting to know each other. And then during that time, she wrote about the work that I was doing, my theater-based work, because I'm a multidisciplinary artist. And she wrote about my work in the Luso-American paper, which is the Portuguese American paper, and the launching of Lips, which was there for 3 or so years. And we had a really long, wonderful relationship and getting to know each other and doing poetry and spoken word events in the midst of exhibitions that I would turn over with different women artists or artists who identified as women in the space, like on a monthly basis. So thank you so much, Marina. I'm inspired by you. I have loved watching your work change and grow and seeing you develop as this powerful artist, and the anthology introducing us to each other All these, my peers that I am being exhibited with amongst wonderful writers and poets and artists, and meeting each other and just being a part of this community and talk and hearing from, I have so many different thoughts that are running through my head, and what everyone has mentioned today, from my dear, I wrote it down, my dear love, what Darla said, my dear one. Wow, that was so powerful. Definitely. From fertility treatments, I was like thinking about, why don't more people talk about freezing their eggs? I wish I had known that at 20. What Danielle's amazing, wonderful exhibit coming up, and her powerful work, Danielle Scott. I'm always impressed and moved by her work. All of you and the new people I've met. The tornadoes are instances of order and moments of chaos. I love that. I have a tornado art piece like on my right. So thank you for introducing me to these wonderful people in my life. I hope to get to know you all more in the near future. This piece, I actually brought it to share with you.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's right there live. That's
right
so exciting.
I made this piece for the Divine Feminist, which I had to go grab the book because it was like right there. I made this piece specifically for Marina's call. She put me into like a call of action. And I work really great on deadlines. If you give me all the time in the world, I always put myself last. I'm a community organizer, an adjunct professor. I work full time, and I'm always organizing something or other. I'm a Newark hustler, as they like to say. And I've always got a million things going on, and I usually tend to put myself last. That's why the my dear one really spoke to me, because I think that we do have to be more conscious of loving ourselves more deeply. And what does that look like? What does self-care look like? And this piece, really, when Marina shared, hey, can you make something? I produced this piece within a week's time, not even, like right away, I knew what I wanted to create, and I started to make this cutting board piece. So although I'm trained, and my background, my academic training is in theater, I graduated from Rutgers Newark as a theater major. Then I went to CUNY's Applied Theater Studies program, and I had my master's in applied theater, and then pursued my drama therapy credentials. I am a multidisciplinary artist. Like, I've learned how to build sets, paint, create art, do lighting, design. Sometimes I have heard people say that, and I just want to share this here, that theater artists are not considered art, like we're theater people, not artists. And that always blows my mind, because we are trained in so many different areas to create visually stories on stage. And when it comes to my work as a artist, when I create personal artwork, how I started the cutting board series, first there's self-portraits. Usually my work is about my identity, being Portuguese American, Luso American, my identity in self, but also the intersections of my experiences navigating me walking through the world, and my mom, who was an immigrant. She recently passed away. I lost my mom last year. And that's been really difficult to go through in this time. I also lost my uncle. This piece, I mean, everything's a blur, but this piece was made, I believe, in April. What was the timeline? Am I correct in saying that,
Yes.
Marina?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was right before my uncle passed away and before my mom passed away. So the self-portrait work that I usually do, that's kind of like my performative self coming out, like my theater performance, putting on these roles. And then I do the photography work myself. I usually set up the camera and take the picture. There's usually something going on, like a set, definitely inspired by Cindy Sherman's work. it being performative, and then really piecing together almost like a puzzle piece. If you see my works, it's almost like it's chaos. It's chaos, like maybe that's why I love that quote about tornadoes. There's chaos and then it's order. And I'm like, it's a puzzle that comes together, and I put together the puzzle as I'm creating the piece. So I start with an image, and in this particular image here in this piece called Clean Up the Mess, America, Clean Up the Mess. I added the second part, but it's just called Clean Up the Mess, America. In my initial like creation of this piece, I was thinking about like pandemic survival, about like this idea of prayers and thoughts are going to keep us, like we have to pray, we have to depend on faith here to survive. We don't know what tomorrow is. And I'm someone who's not, although I'm Catholic, I was brought up in the Catholic Church, and I, like Cindy, went to church every Sunday, mostly because the Girl Scouts was connected to the church in Newark. And so I would have to go to Mass because I was a Girl Scout, but my mom did not, she stopped believing in God. And to transition a little bit, my father passed away when my mom was pregnant with me. And my mom had to go into becoming, she was completely dependent on thinking that my father would be the main provider of the household and support the family, like this belief that many of us are taught. And my father died at 32 and my mom was 27. And I come from a generation of three generations of widows. My mom lost her husband at 27. My grandmother lost her husband at 39, and my great-grandmother lost her husband at 39. So I've been raised with like these, this culture or these belief, like gender, what's masculine, feminine, you just do whatever you need to do to survive. And essentially my mom went to work as a housekeeper. And in this piece, what you're seeing is domestic workers, right? The domestic workers who weren't really given an opportunity to take off of work. They don't have a choice. You don't have sick days. You have to go to work. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about undocumented workers at the time as well. And basically you can see there's fear in my eyes. This also of this idea of what's going to keep America going. Who are the frontline workers? Who's out there? Who's out there essentially picking up the pieces, cleaning up the mess? Who's expected to go to work? Who doesn't have a choice? And you could see that I'm playing also with these images or these icons of like Rosie the Riveter, the colors of the American flag, the red, the bleach with the white and blue, the bucket red, the handle blue, the mop blue. They're like our colors for the flag. And so when I think about, in a lot of ways, the roots, the strength, the backbone of this country, it's immigrants, the workers on the front lines. And again, like these images, the image that you see with the flowers and the different golden arches, like this Baroque kind of feel and look, that's actually traditional to our Portuguese culture, where in what they call the folklore, folk dancing, you'll normally see women wear these scarves on their heads. I like to wear them around my neck. Mm-hmm. And these are images that play with the different regions of Portugal, where the dancers are from, or where that particular scarf represents the region in Portugal. And I always play with those colors and imagery in my work through my connection to my identity. So that is a little bit on this piece, and of course the images of faith, and also the image of death, right? You see Jesus, who is dying or dead in what we call the Virgin Mary. I like to identify her as, the mother, Fatima, however, different names that we have given to this goddess, this divine feminist goddess that I personally pray to. In the Portuguese culture, that's who I light my candle to, the Virgin Mary. I don't know if she was a virgin, I can't vouch for that, but I like saying virgin anyway. It's my favorite words. But yeah, that's a bit on my piece. And interesting enough, I feel like I've been cleaning up messes since all of last year. And just personally, and also just lastly on this piece that I want to share, I still have family that work in housekeeping or do domestic work. And one of my family members who lost, her husband, my uncle, she still had to go to work. Like, she took off for the time of my uncle's death. He was in a coma actually for some time in the hospital. And I'm sharing this because I think it's horrible, but like later on during the year when she got sick, she couldn't take off for work. And I said to my aunt, I'm like, Dia, you have to stay home. You're sick. Like, you have to rest. And she's like, I can't, I'm going to lose my job. I have no more days I can take off. I took all the time off I have when your uncle passed away. And these are things that sometimes we don't think about, or it's, I'm like, just talk to your boss, right? For me, that I have that privilege or that like relationship with my supervisors, where if I was sick, I would still feel comfortable saying to my supervisor, I'm sick, I can't go to work. And she felt that she could not, and that's thousands of people in this country went through that and are still going through that right now.
Absolutely. I think this piece is reflective of so many things feminism really, tackles, which is the idea of domestic work, right? Being so akin to being a female job, but really it is the work of so many women, right? And it's not regarded as valid or valued. I love the idea of, the idea of God as a female figure, right? Which we for years have sort of eradicated that idea. I love, my feminism is too very much informed by an immigrant sensibility because we are the daughter of immigrants, right? So I feel like we can't divorce that ever. But I want to thank you for sharing this piece, Lily. Thank you for inspiring me and so many folks always. Do you have anything coming up on the horizon as far as theater work or artwork or?
Well, there are some projects that I'm working. It's an intergenerational theater project. It will be with seniors in the Newark community. So if you know any seniors actually who would like to participate in this project, they will be virtually meeting with students at Elementary Street School. And I will be teaching the students how to interview and write monologues. And I am partnering with Malik Whitaker, who will be working with the students so that they could design portraits of the elders. So that's my next upcoming theater community-based project. And I'm hoping that that some of the love letters that I recently found, well, not found, I found one love letter written by my father. He would mail, basically, he would mail his letters to my mom in Portugal, and my mom would write him back. and they got married through their love letter writing, and she eventually, you know, married him and came to the United States. And as I mentioned, I don't know my father. He died right before I was born. And last year I found one of these letters and I asked my mom to read me the letter written by my father, because I don't know him that way. And she read me the letter, which was always very difficult for her because it would bring back trauma and memories and like his passing. And my hope is to bring these letters alive through a book, a small book that Marina is going to help me transcribe. And I'm really excited about that work in the far future, but near future of slowly working towards that personal project.
I'm super excited about that too. Thank you again, Lily, for joining us, and thank you for your contribution to the anthology. Last but not least is Lynn McEniry, one of my all-time favorite female poets. Poet, editor, and educator, born in Yonkers, New York, and lives in Morristown, where she teaches at St. Elizabeth University. Her first collection of poems, Some Other Wet Landscape, was published by Get Fresh a few years ago, and she's a resident artist with Arts by the People. Lynn, thank you for joining us. Will you please read Holy, Holy, Holy?
I will. Thanks so much, Marina, and everybody else. I'm so full. I don't know where to go. Luckily, I could read off the page. So this is Holy, Holy, Holy. Holy dead deer on the shoulder of the road, holy 5-car pileup, and holy traffic jam. All make us slow down. All make us decide. Do we look? Do we turn away? As you save us from ourselves, from our speeding through the day, from our turning up the tunes, tuning out the world as we rush from place to place. Holy dead dear, this day praise God, you are whole in leaving your body, your tender broken body, so worthy of our sorrow, our pouring out of praise for your beauty. Your final gift graces us with the will to live slowly, live tenderly, live carefully. And holy, the 5-car pileup, result of the one who made you holy, dear, the one who swerved and the one who hit you, and the 3 who hit them in our love and mercy for them, even those strangers to us. Holiness. Holiness calls for us to bow our heads ever so briefly, to cross ourselves, Father, Son, Spirit, to pray to God, even in our doubting, because you 5 cars and you inside them are holy in your life-giving to us, worthy of our devotion to you and to all before you who have served in your same way, even without knowing you would serve as catalyst for our safety. And holy traffic jam, you who we tend to want to curse, you who become holy when the deer has died and the 5 cars have piled up, you become for us holy. You model for us forgiveness. Forgive greed, forgive selfishness, trade sin for grace, trade wrath for mercy, trade frustration for compassion. Holy dear, holy 5-car pileup, holy traffic jam, in your suffering, let me find silence to pray. Let us know sacrifice. Let me beg, Lord, or whoever, to have mercy on my soul. Teach me patience, teach grace, and eyes wide open to the holy that surrounds us.
So Holy, Holy, Holy was my favorite poem of 2020. It struck me, no pun intended. But do you want to talk a little bit about, I know it seems self-explanatory, but like we all know, poetry and the self always has sort of hidden layers and meanings. So if you want to talk a little bit about the birth of Holy, Holy, Holy.
Yeah, and I mean, funny to go last, the way that Lillian was making all of these connections. That happens for me every time there's a sharing of art and or reading or whatever, and the connections when you don't plan them are even deeper, you know. And from the very beginning, when Cindy was reading to and talking about growing up Catholic, and you know, the story is similar to what everybody else said. You know, I grew up Catholic. My mother was a very faithful person. My grandmother, her mother, who I was very close to, was not. She taught me about ghosts, and she told her Chinese fortune every day. And she grew up Catholic, so she had this respect. But her father was Jewish. He was a German Jew who, you know, escaped, you know, some horrors, married an Irish Catholic, was let go by his family. So there were these kind of like beautiful tensions in my life growing up around religion and what is holy. So during the pandemic, some of us have been writing together, and I went out. I have this paranoia of driving cars to begin with. So that's another whole long story. But on a COVID day, there were no cars on the road. We were going like on 287, a big highway. And I was even somehow more scared than I had been in traffic jams because of COVID and where were all the people and what was going to happen. And I was getting to like, oh, maybe I never want to leave the house anymore. And I didn't want to get to that. And then we were riding together, and, you know, deer come and go around. And I was in a motorcycle accident where we hit a deer. So they come up, or a deer hit us actually. And then I went home and we were talking about a poem, and this just came to me. And it is for me that cross of, you know, the traditions that were brought up in that we can't seem to shake, you know, and then our deep struggle with them when we try to rid ourselves of them because we don't believe in all the trappings, you know, and the hate that we didn't even realize when we were taking all of this in. So I think in the poem, I'm exploring some of that during COVID and making these connections of really what is holy for us and the things that we don't pay attention to. And, you know, my aunt who I've had a lot of loss, a lot of my poetry is about loss in a 7-year period. My mom died when she was 51 in 97. And then 7 years later, my dad died. He was 62. And in between that time, I lost 11 other immediate family members, 3 grandparents, 4 aunts and uncles, 2 people in my own generation. So it's hard to slow down. And so I just got to thinking like about all these people, like we don't ever get to see the deer again, and we don't ever get to see the other cars in the accident again, but somehow they've become part of who we are, you know?
Absolutely.
And during COVID, I was missing that, even the horror, you know, even missing the horror of encounter.
Wow, the horror of encounter. Oh, certainly, right. Anything to sort of shake us from the numbness, right?
Yeah.
And I, you know, this is the last question that we're talking about, but what does it mean for poetry to be feminist practice for you? I think I almost feel like you answered it, like you're documenting, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a lot about, I mean, we talked a lot about the body tonight, and, you know, I weighed 96 pounds until I was pregnant with my son when I was 18 years old. And you know, weight became a struggle for me about, you know, 10 years ago. I'm on this opposite end of the spectrum. So when I was young and you know, who was I when I was a kid? My dad, like Kathy's, was one of the biggest feminists I know. I mean, he made sure like there were no gender chores in the house and stuff like that. You know, we had to learn how to work the lawnmower and take out the garbage, and my brothers had to wash dishes, and, you know, so I grew up in that, but outside in the world, I had, you know, no good sense of myself, you know, the total negative body image made my whole, like, just silenced me. And then there was poverty and alcoholism and other stuff going on at home. And it almost took me, I mean, I knew Darla and I went to grad school together in 2009. And right before that, in 2007, I was divorced. So I was working at St. E's then. And I think the people there helped me find my voice for the first time. They helped me get through a divorce from a marriage, a long marriage I shouldn't have been in. Then I took my name back, you know, then I said, I'm going to be this poet. Somebody else, a number of us said, you know, when are we going to identify ourselves as the creators that we are? Yeah, mother creator is okay, right? And I'm happy to be a mother. My kids are my joy, but I'm so much more than that. And it took me a long time to be able to say that was okay. And even now in the pandemic, I'm trying to figure out that feminist part again, right? Marina first said to me, you know, like, how do you identify yourself? Well, say that word, like non-hetero. Yeah. I can't stand labels. I can't stand them. Like, they confine us so badly. So, but yet I identify in a very feminine way in some parts of myself. And so, I don't know, trying to find peace inside yourself from that, you know. And I think we all said that in all these different ways. And for me, it's about those connections. The poem is about the connection. And when you said you were going to make this anthology, that's what I felt. Oh, to be amongst, you know, people who identify in the way that makes them the most comfortable is going to be one of my great joys, you know, and just being able to learn from you and hear your voices and see your vision. So I think that's what feminism is for me, and to just be able to keep exploring it and keep learning what it is for myself, you know.
Absolutely. You know, one of the greatest joys of this anthology for me, who was looking for hope and who still very much looks for hope every day, right? For various reasons. I think this anthology is a way to locate it and to be alive outside of our bodies, right? To know that we exist outside of our bodies, which I think is the most feminist thing of all, right? Is to document to say we are here, right? And that we are queer, and that we are women, and that we are feminist, and we're non-binary, and we won't be labeled, right? Unless we choose to be labeled. So all those things. Lynn, can you please put your social media handles and a link to some other wet landscape, which is a phenomenal book of poetry, like Lynn said, about sort of loss and finding life outside of it, or within it, really. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you to Cindy. Thank you to Danielle Bero, Danielle Scott, Darla, Grisel, Kat, Lillian, and again to you, Lynn. And I think, Christina, do you think we should open it up to Q&A?
We also have Paula's video. Can we play that?
Oh, yes, we can end with Paula's video. I'm sorry. I'm going by the list of folks here. We can certainly play Paula's
video. Great, yes. Great. Give me one moment, please.
Yes. And we'll end with Paula Nevez. So while you look for it, I'll just read her thing really fast. Born in Newark, New Jersey, another season of crisis, resilience, and awakening, Paula Nevez is a first generation Luso-American queer writer, multimedia artist, educator, and collaborator who still kicks a ball around, among other things. And I will put her social media stuff on the chat. Thank you, Christina.
Hello all. I'm sorry I cannot be with you tonight in person to talk about and promote this wonderful anthology that I am so honored to be a part of, both for including a poem of mine and also a photograph. And I just want to give big thanks to curator Marina Carreira for this labor of love and for Get Fresh Books for publishing this important work. My particular contribution to this had to do with sport, soccer in particular. I have always been super interested in Title IX and the effects that that's had on several generations of women, most particularly the one that I belong to, where we didn't really get to reap the benefits of Title IX the way other generations have, and arguably the generations that came after mine have not been all that successful in getting funding and recognition as well. So that poem that I wrote that is in the anthology is a nod to that. And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. I've always been a big fan of soccer, of playing soccer in particular, since I was 14. I was often discouraged from doing so. Again, that's a generational issue, I think. But I persisted, and I kind of had to stop playing when I was an adolescent, but rediscovered it as an adult very joyously, and I'm embracing it the older I get and kind of exploring it in new ways. And I am excited to share a poem with you, the poem with you. It's an abecedarian, and it's called The ABCs of Soccer, from Cristiano Ronaldo to Women. And there's a tongue-in-cheek epigraph. Ronaldo didn't actually say this, but I imagine it's something that he might have said. Abs and Ballon d'Or, I didn't always have them. Alone, the family house, blinds drawn on crooked basalt, crooked as country boys' teeth, daring to cut the light enough till it's clear as aguardente. Father drank before he found God. Gardener who left the pitch to his son. Cristiano, the footballer I was. A girl hat-tricking 2 decades too soon. Just one more minute, Ma, kicking the ball in the street till the sun lifted the fire over water again. Madeira, you're not so far from New Jersey. Or anywhere, Paula takes penalties like Paul, quixotically believes they'll reward her goals. Ronaldo sends the women's team soccer boots and palavras, tells them privilege can rub off. Until then, keep dreaming. No, really. Volley till the stands and scores translate to World Cup dollars Rapinoe wants. Run, girls, X's and O's, turn hat tricks over walls, and yellow card the blindsiders in the zone. Thank you so much.
And that was that last image was a piece of artwork that Paula also contributed to the anthology. Shout out to Paula. Do we open it up now, Christina? I'm sorry, to questions.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Any questions or
wonderful.
comments, please put them right in the chat or Q&A box.
Absolutely. Lots of love for Paula, who had an emergency, couldn't be here. So while folks think up some questions or comments or just, love notes for all of us, I just want to remind folks that they can get the copy of their anthology from Get Fresh Books. I will put the link in the chat. Yes, thank you, Lillian. It's like I said, all the proceeds of the anthology go to the Pink Door Writing Retreat, which is a safe space for creators who are non-men, folks of color. Oh, Danielle said read a poem. Okay, I can certainly read a poem. I'll read my poem from the book. While folks, I guess, think of questions. So my contribution to the anthology was a poem, and very much like Lily, I grew up praying to a holy mother, right? The Virgin Mary, as we know her, and lots of saints, especially female saints. And one of them was Saint Philomena, who is a patron saint of children, of women who are pregnant, but also known as a patron saint of the mad, right? Of folks who are deemed crazy. So I was like, bingo, right? Who else would understand me in that way? So this is a prayer to her from one woman to another. A viuva, a widow told me, pray to Philomena that she grant your daughters immunity from every serpent oil sold to them on Instagram. You, meek little statue on my windowsill, charged with making all the difference in shielding them from horrors I've imagined twice over before this pandemic began. By a faith older than man's imagination, free them from the sparkly vice this world uses on girls, the one where nothing squeezes through but expensive perfume and feathered stationery, mink lashes and red bottoms, diamond-studded phones and tiny waists. Let this too pass so that I can say we didn't survive a goddamn plague for you to turn around and think youth is a Kardashian face and 5,000 likes. Your foremothers didn't endure apocalypse after apocalypse for you to be so basic to believe you are not more than the madness spoon-fed you by patriarchy and diet culture. Philomena, child martyr who traded virginity for salvation, knowing nothing of either, scourged, drowned, shot, and decapitated by men old enough to be your father. Save all women from the myths that did you in. May the only anchor that weighs us be our beloved's heart. May the only arrows we strike be towards our demons. Thank you, everybody.
So beautiful, Marina.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate you. And I appreciate everyone who attended today. Thank you to all the readers. Thank you to everyone in this anthology. Thank you to Get Fresh. Thank you, Christina, for giving us this space, this very safe, beautiful space. And if there are no questions, then again, I'll just leave you with my gratitude and my
I want to
appreciation.
thank you for teaching me
There's a
about this
question.
saint. Why didn't anyone teach me about this saint when I was growing up? I would have prayed to her every day.
Clearly, my mother knew I would need her in some capacity.
Kristen has a question in the chat there, Marina.
Oh, Kristen, yes. Let me just, I don't know where, did I miss it? I don't.
It's the Q&A.
Q&A.
Oh.
Thanks for this awesome event. Oh, good. I was going to ask if Marina would read something too. To all presenters, who and what are some of your inspirations, and or who are your favorite feminists? Thanks. Thank you, Kristen.
So who are some of your favorite feminists, folks? Mine is Audre Lorde. I'll say one.
Dolores Huerta for me.
Yes, Dolores Huerta.
Eve Ensler for me. She inspired much of my work.
Adrienne Rich.
Yeah.
Frida Kahlo.
Yes.
Toni Morrison.
Facts.
Madonna.
Madonna.
Yes.
Janae Aiko.
Yes, Janae Aiko.
Hey, Tiffany Haddish.
Yes.
Angela Davis, for sure.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Maya Angelou, obviously, right? Lucille Clifton and Mary Oliver, as far as yes, and thank you, Grisel, for sharing your essay on Audre Lorde. Please, everyone, I'm literally gonna open it up now too, so that I can read it in a little bit. Any other questions now that I know there's a Q&A button? I was feeling very boomery when I couldn't see.
Ease up on the boomers.
Oh, sorry.
I also want to add my mom, my first feminist.
Yes.
The
our
feminist
mothers.
I didn't know was a feminist till I was a feminist.
Absolutely. Snaps to our moms, even the most as reluctant feminists, as I like to call them, our grandmothers for sure, and our foremothers, and all the women in our lives who mother us, and to us who are mothers in so many ways, right? Like we said, we are all creators. So shout out to us, and thank you all again for contributing to the anthology. And thank you,
you so
Grisel,
much,
Alice Bag,
everyone.
and polystyrene.
And if you haven't picked up your copy or went to order, we hope that you do. The links have been all over the chat, including some links for other very, very important works. I know I can't wait. My list is growing. Thank you all so much. Stay safe. You may have also seen that we have 2 amazing events coming up tomorrow. One is Ancestors at Play, Visibility and Audacity for the Queer Black Archive, and also the Newark LGBTQ Community Center, one of our sponsors, is hosting the Can You Imagine virtual gala. The tickets are free, but if you're in a position to donate, we hope that you will. It's an all volunteer-led organization, and we're grateful for any and all support that you can offer. We hope to see you again. Please get the books and stay safe. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you
so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you
That's
so
fresh
much.
book.
Thank you, guys.